We have just hit the top of the hour. So welcome the 5 of you who are not area directors or chairs. Welcome to the CBOR working group session at IETF 119 in lovely Brisbane. Note the note well, as we always do. You've seen this now all week, so let's just move on. Yes, I keep forgetting this, so I'll remind everybody, please use the Meet Echo to get the blue sheet signed. Given how few people we have, I'm not going to bother with a queue. If you have something to say, just go up to the microphone or unmute yourself remotely. There are hardly any people on, so. If we wind up needing the queue, we will use it, but for otherwise. So we're starting off with a 30-minute tutorial. Does it make sense to continue with this plan, given how few people are on? Christian, what are your thoughts?
I think yes. Because I think it's still relevant to some of us, and B, it will make a great recording for
well, that's
everyone
true, yes.
who will look at this later.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, you're right. So let's proceed with that. So that's the first thing on the agenda is our tutorial session. Karsten, should I turn over the slide control to you? Let's see how I do this, or Christian, can you give the slide control over to Karsten? Well, actually, let me do a quick interrupt before we start that. I wanted to introduce Ori, and I forgot to. We have a new area director. Our former area director, Francesca, is in the room, but we also have our new one, Ori Steele. Ori, give a quick intro.
Hi, I'm Ori Steele. I'm your new area director. I look forward to supporting all of your work. You may always reach out to me by email. I'm fairly responsive. If you can make it your way into that Slack instance that shall not be named, I'm often found there. And you can contact me there as well. I look forward to working with all of you, especially Barry. It's great to have a chance to work together, and Karsten as well. I'll often be coming to the mic in this room to take off my hat because I am a CBOR enthusiast. So make sure if I ever slip up and I get excited about CBOR and it's not clear whether I'm responding as area director or not, please ask me to clarify. I'll do my best as I'm learning how to take hats off and put them on again. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Ori. Karsten, take it away.
Thank you. Maybe I should tell people that I'm best reached on Telegram, and Zulip works pretty well. I don't know this S word because I personally have no S in my life, so sorry, can't join that. Okay, so what we wanted to do in the first half hour was go through 2 areas where we have made some recent progress. Diagnostic notation, or EDN as we often call it, and CDDL, the Concise Data Definition Language. And this is really about drafts also. So we are not just having a tutorial, we are also looking whether we can advance some of the stuff that hasn't advanced yet. So most of you will be aware that CBOR is a binary interchange format or data representation format. And the problem with binary formats is that you cannot really read them. We have this CBOR pretty thing which makes them almost readable hex dumps, but it's not really very useful. So we have 2 languages, textual languages associated with CBOR. One is the diagnostic notation, or EDN, and the other one is CDDL. EDN is for instances, so you can take any CBOR file and translate it to EDN. You also can translate it to YAML if that is your thing, but here in the working group we are using EDN. So this is a text form for a single instance, and it's based on JSON. So everything you are thinking about JSON is going to work in EDN plus the new things in there. CDDL is something that some people call a schema language, a data definition language, which we use for specification and validation. It's not about single instances. It is about capturing data models, and the technology we are using is tree grammars. This is highly inspired by ABNF, so syntactically you have to look very close to see whether something is ABNF or CDDL. And yeah, given that the CBOR data model is a superset of the JSON one, we can describe both JSON and CBOR, and that has turned out to be quite useful in some recent specifications. But we are also looking at other things like CSV. You may not be aware how incredibly important CSV is as a representation format in some data engineering. So it would be good if we would get better there as well. So this is just an individual draft that's definitely not ready, but we already have a few implementations. Okay, so CBOR, the interchange format, and EDN and CDL, two associated textual languages. So let's talk about EDN first. Yeah, we are flipping back and forth between calling this diagnostic notation, which is 7 syllables, and EDN, which is 3. You understand why I want to use EDN today. So this is JSON. Everything you can do in JSON, you can do in EDN. Actually, everything you can do in interoperable JSON, you can do in EDN. You know, there's this sliver of toxic waste on JSON, and we cannot do that, and we don't want to be able to do that. So then there are some additions that are just motivated by the fact that CBOR can do more things. One is binary strings. We can hex encode them. We can base64 encode them. We also can treat some UTF-8 text as hex. And the binary stuff is always in single quotes. So that's what the convention, how you see that something is binary. And I will completely destroy that convention on one of the next slides. The second thing is tags. So this is currently very, very basic. You just provide a tag number and open parenthesis, then the content of that tag and a closing parenthesis. So 18 would be a tag you might find on a cosign 1. And the thing in the parenthesis is the cosign 1 data structure. And the third addition is generalizing the map keys. JSON only has strings, text strings as map keys, and CBOR allows anything as map keys. So the example you see here is from the Yang CBOR RFC, and it uses SIDs, numeric keys in those maps. SIDs are usually deltas, and when we don't want a delta for some reason, then we have to tag the number with tag 47, and that's why you see a tag 47 in the map key there. Okay, but otherwise this really looks like JSON. Oh, we actually have added comments. Some people want to add comments to JSON, and yeah, since we weren't bound to being backwards compatible with JSON, we added those. So let's quickly compare this to CBOR Pretty. So this is an example from RFC 9200, the ACE base specification. And here you see a map that has an authorization server, an audience, a scope, and a nonce. And these have specific map keys assigned to them. And you have the values. So 3 of the values are text strings, 1 is a byte string. And the same thing you can see here, but you don't get all the annotation, and you do get to see all the hex bytes that are going to be on the Y. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about CBOR Pretty, and I'll focus on EDN. from now on. EDN is like 10 years old now. It started out as diagnostic notation, got the E later because we started extending it like mad. And one really important thing is that there are lots of CBOR documents that have embedded CBOR, because you essentially can get at embedded CBOR with zero overhead in CBOR, which is very different from other representation languages. That's a rather likely thing to have. And of course, this you can read this when you have worked for 10 years with CBOR, but maybe it's better to have the expanded version, and so you can embed EDN between angle brackets, double angle brackets. And here we see a map with just one element. A1 tells us it's a map with one element, or one member, excuse me. And that map maps number 1 to number 1. And number 1 is the algorithm, and the other number 1 is AES-GCM 128. So this is slightly more readable, but of course this is shorter because it's just text coded. So embedded CBOR is something you cannot necessarily extract from a CBOR instance, because without additional information, you just don't know whether that is CBOR or not. Now, there are enough redundant bits in CBOR that usually works reasonably well, but yeah, it's better if you actually have a data definition, then you can do this perfectly. As I said, we have comments. We added hash marks as comments, but that doesn't fix RFC 9054 because you use the hash mark for CDDL there. And we cannot use a hash mark in CDDL because it already has a meaning in CDDL. So we couldn't fix CDDL to fix 9054. Okay, that's one of those areas where we just have the different legacies, the JSON legacy here, and the ABNF legacy for CDDL, causing us to have divergence where we wouldn't like to have it, but it's there. Second top requirement was to allow a trailing comma in maps and arrays, because that really helps with Git. And we have a new thing called application-oriented literals, which are just an abuse of the text string, excuse me, of the byte string syntax. If the thing that is in front of the first quote is not H or B64 or one of the other 3 or 4 things allowed by 7049, then this can be an application literal. And here, for instance, DT is for date time, and it parses an RFC 3239 string and gives you the POSIX date. And of course, it's not going to deal with leap seconds and all this stuff, but it's just to have more reasonable examples. Or if you want to have an IP address, then in binary, then you can use the IP literal. I'm not going to go into details on this. You know where to find the draft. Actually, the EDN draft that we just have completed in this working group has the term literals in its name, because it started out as a draft just doing the literals. And then we started to put in things like an ABNF and more information for additional small extensions. Yeah, so this will be with ISG soon, I hope. So I hope when Ori comes home, he finds it on his desk. So we are done with that, but we have these extension points. And the main extension point of EDN now is the application-oriented literal. And so right now that we have this new hammer, we are looking at nails and looking for nails. And actually, the most important thing, there is another draft I'll come to in a minute. The most important thing that we found in our specifications was that we were hardwiring all these numbers into our examples. Okay, in this particular case, that's not a problem because that's an RFC that is very unlikely to change. So everybody knows that one is algorithm and one is ASGCM 128, but it's a disaster when you're actually developing documents, because all your examples have hard-coded numbers in them and you have to update them and you're going to mess this up all the time. So we added an application-oriented literal called E for external reference to CDDL. In this case, this just says there must be a CDDL somewhere that tells you what ELG is, and we insert that number here, and we have a valid example. So much less fixing of examples, but of course the examples no longer have the actual code points. So for somebody who wants them to look up numbers, well, you have to look into the correct table for that now. So here's an example. The GM admin draft we have over in the core working group that has a number of things like true, 10, and 5, but it also has map labels that actually are numbers. And so because you cannot write variables in EDN, it's easy to do this in CDL, but not in EDN. People were writing text strings where they actually were going to use numbers. So this is, you cannot put this through CI systems because they will immediately tell you that everything is wrong. And of course, if you don't have CIs, you make many more errors. So the idea is that the EDN processor actually can read CDDL and extract constants from that. And if you have a CDDL that tells you that group mode actually is 33 and all these other things, then you can transform this into this E notation. And now you have an example that will work even if those not really assigned yet numbers actually change. Ori.
Hi. Taking off my hat. The dash versus underscore in the E examples, is the casing snake case versus kebab case significant?
Yes.
Can you say more?
Well, CDDL inherited from ABNF. ABNF is kebab. When we did CDDL, people told us, oh my God, in my programming language, I don't have skewers. I only have underscores. So we just allowed both. And this is one example where, I mean, this comes from a spec that has been written in CDDL. So they have been using the hyphens. And this comes from a spec that didn't have CDDL in the beginning. So they used the underscores.
Okay. So it's fair to say that, you know, authors of document can use either. And
yes.
Do you give them any guidance that they ought to use one consistently, or that they should mix them, or is there? Just don't mix them, right? I don't know. It's like this is like the kind of thing that
we also have lowercase and uppercase. So yeah, that's where different approaches collide. Yeah. So in the tool CDLC, which supports this at the moment, you can. Well, actually in the CDDL tool, not in the CDLC tool, you can set an environment variable, so it will find the CDDL file that will govern this. And now your question will be, what do you do if you need two CDDL files? And the answer is you create a third CDDL file that imports the other two. Then you can do something like diag to transform this thing into the actual wire format, which will be 10 bytes. So this is what your CI system is probably going to check. Okay, so this is the E approach. I wrote an earlier draft that I probably now have to update. that defines a convention how we can deal with code points to be assigned. And probably the most important innovation here is to use the abbreviation CPA instead of TBD, because a draft that has tons of TBDs in them looks like it's not done, but a draft that has CPAs in them is just waiting for ANA to do the assignments, which happens at a stage very late in the processing. Code point to be assigned, or code point assignment, or code point assigning, something like that. It could be anything. What is the CPA, Certified Public Accountant? Yeah, okay. Fits well, right? So dealing with these numbers is what an accountant should be good in. Yeah, here's another example. The previous example was from the problem details RFC, or from what led to the problem details RFC, and we now can just write things like e-title, e-detail, and e-code 400, and this is why you need the CPA thing. Code 400 is not a code point to be assigned. That is correct, so that's well defined. It's 128, you all know that. Oh, the semicolon is the comment in CDDL, because it has been in Lisp since 1958, and so we're not going to change that. Okay, so that was one really useful addition to EDN that can be done entirely using its extension point. The other one is that you get these things. Hope you have your telescopes with you. So this is an example from RADS, where we have a data structure that includes a measurement information. And the measurement, well, that's a few hashes pasted together in interesting ways. So when you actually put an example in your document, it's going to be really big. And again, you probably want to have this in there so your CI system can check your example. So we just invented another literal, but this time not for reaching out into CTDL, but reaching out into another EDN file. So you can say reference measurement one.diag here. And of course, there's all this E stuff in here as well. Now you actually have the measurement information in there. So this needs to be an EDN file on its own, which of course decodes to a CBOR data item, and the CBOR data item goes in right there. So this is extremely simple. Both E and ref are less than 10 lines of code, and they really help, I think. Okay, so this was the first 15 minutes. I didn't quite keep my time here. The question really is, what are we going to do with the draft behind them? I think it's draft Bormann CBOR E ref or something like that, or maybe with an EDN thrown in. Yeah, I would like to get more feedback from people who are trying this so we can decide whether we want that. Okay, that was the EDN part. Now let's talk about CDL. There are 3 documents here. One is the thing is now 5 years old and we know so many errata document. So this fixes a few things, does a little bit of housekeeping, and introduces one significant omission, or actually repairs one significant omission. This just finished working with call and will also be with ISG soon. I'm not going to talk about this, but the main thing is if you know are using something like tag numbers, you no longer have to put them in literally. You can take them from another CDL rule. The second one is more control. We occasionally define new control operators. Control operators are the main extension point of CDDL. So yeah, we had one in 9165, and every 3 years or so, we try to bunch them up and put them into a new document. I'll talk about that in a minute. And the third one is the module structure I already have hinted at, which is a very simple way to support composition of CDL grammars from multiple files. So let's quickly talk about more control. More control adds about a dozen control operators that mostly are concerned with the fact that we sometimes have text that contains some data. And that text may, for instance, be JSON text. And we actually want to be able to write down the data model for the JSON text, but still be able to say we are actually carrying around that JSON text. And we ask the grammar validator to check that it's actually JSON and it fits the data model that was given for it. Yeah, so this is mostly about text processing. There's the odd one occasionally just saying that something is deterministically encoded may be useful. Decimal numbers, various base 16, 32, 64, and 45. Yeah, this is being used in various documents. So for instance, the base 64U for URL, that is used in Red's each measured component. It's the way we can carry both CBOR and JSON around in one of these items. But we actually went ahead and put a printf in there for the case that we have forgotten something here. So if you need a 4-digit hex number or something like that, this can do it. So this says this is actually a 4-digit hex number and preceded with 0x and, or actually it doesn't say 4 digits, sorry. This is a hex number with preceded with 0x, a colon, and a hex float representation. Otherwise, we would have to add all these printf elements as control operators. That becomes tedious very soon. So we are using the C language as a normative reference here and describe which parts of the C language work here. Of course, you cannot use a pointer or something like that. So yeah, that's the more control document. I'm not quite sure about its current status. I think we had a working group last call.
We had a working group last call, but we also had 0 feedback from anyone on the mailing list. So I encourage everyone who looks at this to have a look that is close enough to state something publicly on their opinion on this.
So we probably should send a message to FFT, the Red's each measured components author, that they want this.
I have a question. This is Lawrence.
We have an AJ Stein at the top of the queue.
I'm sorry, Lawrence. I also have a question that probably can be answered by the spec, and it's probably not going to be that interesting or exhaustive. If we talk about this example that you present with printf, is the supposition that a conformant tool would understand all the printf syntax operators? Like that's required or implied by the CDL more control specification now?
Yes, minus the ones that are excluded. So if you look into the document, it tells you which of the ones actually work.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Lawrence, go ahead.
Yeah, you said you weren't using the queue, so so CBOR det, that is CDE, right?
No.
What is
CDE
it?
has its own, defines its own control operators. This is just plain 8949. And if you want to argue we should not have that, let's argue that. I think that's a tenable position.
Well, what, but isn't CDE the only thing in 8949 that's deterministic?
8849 gives you a little bit more latitude than CDE does. And this has, it's somewhere in the cloud spanned by 8949, while CDE says it's in the subset that is actually defined by CDE. So if you look into the CDE draft, that has a control operator .cde to say this is the specific profile. And then you have a .dcbor in the dcbor draft that tells you it's not just CDE, it's also dcbor.
Right.
Control operators are cheap, so that's why I thought.
Well, yeah, but it's, I mean, this is a confusing topic for most people. So I would be a fan of minimizing this, maybe even not having CBOR DET in favor of just CBOR CDE.
Okay. Can you write this as a working class comment, please?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm not currently aware of a draft that uses this, so removing this at this point will have little damage, I think. Okay, so the final thing on in the tutorial segment, might be using a little bit more time, is the modules proposal, which definitely can grow, but we found something like a minimum viable product here by adding 2 directives. Well, first of all, adding the concept of a directive, and then adding 2 directives, which are called include and import. And these have a few options, one of which I will mention, others I won't. So the basic idea is that we now don't just see a CDDL specification as a sea of rules, which up to now it is, with one weirdness when the first rule actually is more equal than the other rules. But we are now thinking about CDDL in terms of modules, which means files, essentially. But they might also be things you can get from IANA and so on. We really haven't explored this space, and we don't have to. We can start by leaving that open, but we definitely want to have that discussion. So what it really does is when you have some CDDL that uses existing CDDL, you can say something like import RFC 9052, and then all the undefined names here are looked up in the RFC 9052 CDDL and are added. And if these have an undefined names that in turn are defined in 9052, this is transitively done again. So essentially you get an extract from 9052 that includes everything you need to make your CDDL module work. So that's a relatively simple thing. It has one remaining bug. We still have to find good ways to treat sockets, because sockets are not always explicitly referenced. So that will probably happen next month. There are various ways of doing this, and we just have to decide what the best one is. There is not an obvious way like here that just falls out your fingers when you try to implement it. Okay, so this is import, and this is really the main functionality. We also have a way to actually munge the namespaces a little bit, because when the COSI document was written, nobody cared about namespace pollution, because that was CDDL describing COSI, but there wasn't an import statement yet. So you can say prefix every name by the string COSI, And then you, of course, have to write your using CDDL by actually using these COSI prefixed names. Now here in this particular case, this is a bit tedious because COSI did take care of namespacing the top level names, but not the internal ones like label and values and empty or serialized maps and so on. So this actually can be, sorry, I hope you have your telescopes with you. This can be simplified a little bit so you can get back to your unnamespaced names by listing them explicitly as the ones you actually want to have from 1952, and then the importer will actually generate aliases. So it will still call the thing COSI dot something, but it will also generate unprefixed aliases. So this is a very, very cheap way to get namespacing, but not having your code polluted by the namespaces you needed for the other imported stuff. Yeah, so the idea here is to have a pretty strong separation of concerns. So there's no change to CDDL itself. That just continues in all its CDDL1 glory. But we have this additional thing, which I'm a bit wary to call preprocessor, because when people hear preprocessor, they think about the C preprocessor. And this is not it. This thing has full control. It fully understands the semantics of what it does. So, well, it's just this processor that understands what an import might be and manufactures a CDDL for you from its inputs that is likely to do what you want it to do. So no macros or something. This is really just importing, and here I put the bad word on the slide. So in the CDDL C tools, C for compiler, there is a -2 flag which switches on this behavior, and TCDDL is needed to actually have a generate CDDL. It can also generate a JSON form and other forms of the other representations of the CDDL information. So you see me typing this pretty often at the moment, where we use the preprocessor to actually generate the CDDL that goes into the other CDDL tool, which is still a separate tool. I need to get around to finishing porting everything over to CDDL-C. And so you can do a generation or validation this way from the input. There's also some slightly more advanced shell magic you can use, so you still get to pipe things into the construct, but I'm not going to show this here. Okay, so this is the implementation, and the implementation is somewhere around 100 lines of code, because you actually do have to do things like import lists and so on, so it's not totally trivial. So what was the difference between include and import? Import just gets you what you need. Include gets you everything, which may be what you want when you are actually not referencing foreign CDDL, but you are referencing your own CDDL modules. So the only place where a CDDL module is actually looked at may be in another module that does an include of it. And if you just do an import, then you may have garbage in your included part that you never see, because the import statement throws it away right away. So that's why we separate these include and import cases. So the include case is really for when you just split up your CDDL into several modules, so they are easier to reference. from outside, and import actually is meant for reference from outside, like an existing published RFC. Yeah, the module that you are referencing may in turn be a module and do its own import statements and so on. And of course, this all works like it should. So the semantics of the reference module do not change based on who imports it. So it does all the importing on its own, and then presents itself to the importing, to the outer layer importing module. So how do you find these files? I've resisted the temptation to actually define that. So the current implementation simply uses an include path mechanism for that. So the current default value of that include path is current directory plus library. Where does the library come from? Well, right now I'm shipping one with cddlc, but we probably need a slightly more formal way to set up this library at some point. But I just wanted to make sure it's batteries included at this point in time. So the things we haven't done yet, but really want to do is IANA scraping. And I've heard from IANA that they are changing everything at the moment. So doing scraping right now might be a waste of time. We wanted to draft scraping, and the main problem there is that we need to think about version numbers. So we probably will have a tilde whacker at some point in time, if you know what that is. But I think that can be separate from defining the module structure itself. And of course, we want to be able to import from GitHub and manufacturer sites and so on. And, I would love to get input from people. And we have somebody in the queue.
AJ, go ahead.
Sorry, I double muted at one point. Well, I was talking about something else in the chat, but I see Ori already got to the point I actually was excited about. So I often invoke examples from a programming language that's very unpopular and often is confusing. So I'll start first with something that's positive to me. Like allowing local file URIs and remote HTTP URIs. Some security people, because they've been traumatized, rightfully so, by the XML sins of the last 20 to 30 years, are rightfully like, please don't do that. I find that wonderfully convenient and awesome. Especially for schema validation things like with JSON schema and XML schema. Obviously, this is like different but analogous. I would think that's great. I don't really know if that's in the cards from what I see here. Is that something that's possible or something that people would be interested in?
Well, as I said, this is currently the implementation, and the implementation has a big red blinking light.
Okay.
That this allows file access. I think we want to define this more closely. But I think on the other hand, right now we can live with things like import RFC 1952 and be glad that this works, and define our exact XML catalog equivalent or whatever in a separate activity.
I was really worried that you were gonna say something like that, and then you did for the I just think that the XML catalog thing, I don't know. I will defer other people's opinions. I know people that will purposely avoid that, even if they are ardent users of XML based technologies. They will refuse that part. Or X include. I don't know why, but like, you know, if you're beyond the point of dipping your toe. But I understand deferring the work. I'm fine with that. But that's exciting. The only other thing I was going to comment on is I find the include versus import thing, like as others, somewhat confusing. Some languages use URLs, but I will tell you the only language I've seen that has this dichotomy between import and versus include with like a special kind of semantics is like the modern version of XSLT 2 or 3. And I made mistakes with this frequently and had to have a more senior developer when I was trying to work code remind me that they don't operate the same. with almost all the modern programming languages and templating languages I'm familiar with, that dichotomy has to be repeated often and leads to very confusing, or leads to lots of confusion from developers who don't really expect it. So having only import or like scoped import might make sense, but you have a fairly strong rationale for this, but that's just my opinion, having seen it right now and not reading the draft. So I'm like being a very not constructive, but not helpful person with opinions, but that's it.
Yeah, I think it's natural for people to take the existing experience from programming languages and try to apply it in this place, and be highly misled by that, because CDL is a rather different animal from a programming language. So this sea of rules abstraction that is underlying CDL enables some things that you really want to treat differently from importing a Python module or something like that. So I think we would have to examine that experience a little bit more closely to see whether it's actually indicative of what will happen with CDL modules. But please do send in these pieces of experience so we can analyze them.
All right,
Brendan.
thanks.
Hi, Brendan here, and just for clarity, I'm an author on one of these on this draft, and Karsten and I've already given him this feedback, and we disagree. But I prefer the Pythonic approach to this. I find if you're going to have include, having import star actually makes it very clear what you are doing, and it eliminates the confusion that AJ has just brought up. I prefer that approach, but as I said, we disagree.
Okay, so we would still have include and import. We would just use different syntax by using.
Yes, that's correct. Import, import star from Concise gives you everything in Concise. It's effectively include, but it at least makes the semantics very clear up front, and you only have a single directive.
Sounds good. Yeah, but the observation would be that this is really just a syntax change. So there is we would still have different semantics for the normal import case and the import star case.
Yeah, this is Lawrence Lundblade here. I'm in favor of the distinction. This all looks familiar from trying to construct the CDDL for EAT, and I think I wrote a lot of shell script stuff to try to replicate some of this, and the not pretty, just because I had to get it done. But definitely the distinction. I definitely understand why you want import versus export, include those use cases, because you're really trying to produce a clean set of rules, and you want to know if you've got excess junk in there that doesn't belong, and so that's why you want to know. And sometimes you're in control of it, and sometimes you're not. So
yeah, I think that there are a few projects like the EAT project and the current project that now have sizable experience with combining multiple CDL files. So I think we can learn from them, and it's good that we are hearing from them. So I got some input from Thomas Fossati offline as well, which was really useful. Okay, so basically, with that feedback, which we still need to process, I think we have something like an MVP for the module structure. There's enough on the to-do list to keep us busy for a couple more months, in particular with the IANA structure. So I did some scraping from IANA for a different project already, and it just works fine, but it's not that useful if they want to change everything. So I'm a bit hesitant to introduce that now. Okay, I think we have completed our tutorial part.
Yes, I'd like to jump over briefly to the to chair slides again, because now we're starting with the with the more working group style part, even though I very much appreciate all the input that already got in there from the in the tutorial part. 3 more documents are up, 2 from Carsten, 1 from me. And I'd like to quite quickly go through the documents that we have now. Time tag is about to be published. It's in Auth 48 already. EDL literals and update grammar, Carsten said everything that is to say about that. And for more control, I think the point has already also been made that, yep, we need more data there. With that, back to Carsten.
Yeah, 24, right. Okay, so this is another draft that bears my name, but actually a significant input came from Maria here. The basic observation is that we now have an efficient representation of Yang data. That works pretty well. This also works great for new stuff like the crypto types. I mean, I'm not going to say anything about whether crypto types is great stuff, but at least Yang CBOR works great with it. But there are some data types that were defined in Yang before Yang sprung a binary type. And the main 2 causes of trouble here are the datetime type, or it's like half a dozen datetime types, and the IP address prefix types, which is more like a full dozen of types. And these fully show the XML legacy still even in Yang CBOR, because they are still encoded as text strings, because Yang CBOR always encodes everything by the Yang base type, and the Yang base type here is text string. So the question is, can we go beyond that? And actually, that's what happened to the subject line. I don't know. That's not hard because we already have CBOR tags for these 2 areas, the datetime tag and the IP address prefix tags for 32-bit IP and 128-bit IP. And we really just need to use them. So they essentially drop in. There may be a few minor caveats, but we can just put them there. There are a few little questions here. Of course, the people who did the Yang definition of these types were not thinking about deterministic representation of the information. So for instance, there are 2 different ways to say there is no time zone associated with this datetime. And now, of course, if you want to implement this in such a way that you actually can completely undo what we are doing here, you have to decide which of the 2 gets the preferential treatment and which of the other one then doesn't. So that's some detail work that we will need to do, and we probably have to analyze a corpus of Yang data that we find. And yeah, we also don't do datetimes with time zones at all. In these tags, we could use the time tag 1001, which is currently in the RFC editor queue, but has been assigned already. To do this, but it's not clear that we would gain much from that. So we need to examine that. So that part is kind of clear how to do this. We still have to exactly say this in Yang terms. So Yang really only knows the base type, which is always a text string. So we have to finger around and finding enough other types that also apply to the thing to decide whether to do this. The 6991 type may not be the top level type. You may have put other types on top of that, and you need to find the interspersed 6991 type to actually decide whether to do this. So this has to be written up in a way that young people also can understand that. And of course, we have zone IDs, so you all know what that is. Yeah, we have to deal with those in some form. So the main remaining requirement now will be to discuss how to announce the capability. Yang CBOR already has two branches, the branches with text string identifiers and the branch with SIDs. And we have a defined way how to handle that. So we just have different media type names for the two, and you need to figure out from your media type what you are sending or what you should be receiving. But this is something that comes in a little bit later. And I think we need to be careful that we don't do something that essentially shuts off any deployment of this. So we have to sneak this in a certain way. And that sneaking in is going to be more difficult to get reliable. So the problem really is that we will have three types of implementations: those that cannot, those that can, and those that need to use these concise forms because they are simply not implementing the other ones. And we cannot touch the Yang modules because these are 5 years, 10 years old modules. If we were touching them, we would completely shut off any deployment. So this has to come from outside the Yang module. And Michael is in the queue.
So I'll just say that I inadvertently encoded with the better encodings in my voucher library, and ESCO said, well, that's a good idea. Wait, I fixed my code. And then I went, wait, that wasn't what I was supposed to do? And that's the sort of the origin of this. The ship has not sailed in Anima with respect to constrained voucher yet. The ship has sailed with respect to core SID, which is an RFC, blah, blah, blah. Right? We've published the CBOR encoding for Yang already. So, but Anima could reference this document as well. And as long as we published it, this year.
Yeah,
okay.
You can use the media type. So you are really in a great situation.
Right. So but in terms of our process, we don't really want to delay very much. We would really like to do it by the end of April, but yeah. Okay. I think that for a lot of things that it will be simply the case of we're going to have some, I think we're going to have some new Yang extensions that'll explain that this is going to be used. But we can also say it's Yang and some other thing. Like there's ways of in our documents to express the fact that we're doing this, and therefore you better support it, okay, going forward. And you better not use the old one. Maybe is the point, okay. I think that's arguable and debatable, and I think we're going to have to multiple things. But I actually clicked the button because I cared about the last point. I think we should do it in this working group. I think when we started. Yang CBOR, we didn't have a CBOR working group, so we didn't core. Right?
I don't remember.
The document lingered for literally the whole pandemic.
2013.
Right? Yeah, 2013. Okay, so we certainly did not have a CBOR working group. What I hear from, I thought I saw him in the room. Okay, no, Jeff is here. Jeff is not at all, not Kent. But what I heard from NetMod is that they wish to be the working group of last resort for Yang. And so I think we have the expertise here to do the encodings that we need, but we're going to need the expertise of the Yang people to write the right extension.
Yes.
But what I've heard this week is that they seem very willing. We just pretty much have to say their name 3 times and then they'll show up.
Good.
Right?
Yeah, so in core, we did those working class codes as joint
Yes.
working class codes.
Yep.
So
Yep.
we would.
So
probably do
I
this
think
here too.
that's, you're asked those questions and that's the thing. And as you say, we can use a media type. I think for the classical network management situation, my understanding is that they can inquire as to what the set of Yang modules that are implemented on the server, and the network management systems are not particularly constrained and can encode in different ways, and they also have to deal with different versions and all sorts of other malarkey. So I don't think that those ends are a problem. I think that they're going to want very quickly to be able to send the more constrained things, because what I hear is they really like Yang CBOR because it's so much smaller, to the point where they can put smaller network interfaces, 1 gig interfaces instead of 10 gig interfaces, just to absorb all their stuff. So that's my answer. Do it here.
Yeah. So in core, as long as we're talking about core conf, we have our own Yang library. So we probably can wedge this somewhere in there.
Yeah, and I think we just probably need to just do it quickly, because it's like a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
Right.
Hello, I am Jeff Haas. For context, this working group work on the B2B Yang module in IETF. I've been an interested observer for CBOR, haven't done anything deeply with it, but have been watching stuff. My primary interest is efficient streaming telemetry. One of the things that I've been looking for and I've been trying to socialize in the various places I touch, because I don't deeply involve myself in NetMod. It's very hard to get them to take up work that isn't something they consider their core piece of work. It's very hard to get them to move. But that is probably the right place for at least a piece of this. The thing I've been trying to socialize is that what's missing, as best I can tell, observing this 2 steps out, is some way to take the Yang modules and decorate them with the necessary information to say that this CBOR tag or the SID value has been bound in a specific way for various contexts as one piece of the machinery. Another piece of the machinery that you've gone through is these types that are very noisy, that have inefficient encodings. And as Michael was saying, he just did it by accident. We need a way to be able to take things that have canonical forms in Yang, like IP address is a string. Well, we have other things that are also strings that are only strings because that's what they thought was convenient. So a way of also decorating those nodes to say, in an alternate format like CBOR, here's the alternate rendering for it. The yin format is canonical, and the regexes are what you can use to define the thing, but it at least gives you a pattern that you can use to talk about things like the CBOR ones. And I think the sort of last piece there that's sort of missing is, once we have alternate ways of doing some of these, there's a number of circumstances where strings or identities are stand-ins for basically what should be an enum. But in Yang land, they are often put as identities for language maintenance purposes. So being able to do efficient string table type things and assigning enum-like properties to strings, whether directly in the Yang module targeting CBOR, or in something in CBOR saying that's coming from Yang, is sort of the cluster of 3 properties I think is most helpful.
Yeah, we already have some mechanics for identities in Yang CBOR. I forget whether we actually can directly encode them as SID, but that would be something we would like to have in here.
Yeah, mostly, again, observing 2 steps out and not being current in all of your work, it looks like everything is rendezvousing in the right place. This is a happy thing for me, as somebody that will want to use this. The thing that seems to be missing is the Yang glue at this point.
Thank you. So the one point I was trying to make is that we should not be in a position where we have to wait for that Yang glue, because how long has 6991 bis been out there? Yeah, so maybe doing something with tools we have in our own hands and actually solve the problem, like the media type name is an expedient way to solve that problem. But let's discuss this. Good. Oh, Maria's in the line.
Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Or does it work?
We even can see you.
Yeah, it works. Nice. You can see me. Nice. Yeah, I'd like to say that the Yang thing has deviations and augmentations and modules. And what we were discussing in our team in CZNIC, it looks like the right way for us to go would be to include augmentations with CBOR module allocate to have a CBOR module which could say there is a stand-in with this tag for this thing, and then in our Yang module, which would describe what we are doing, in our Yang module we would augment those IP types and date types, or we could even include those like a canonical augmentation of those canonical types, and we could also with this add more annotations for our internal types.
Okay, so the question is what we are optimizing here. Are we looking for the best way to integrate this into the Yang world, or are we trying to reduce the time to market from 10 years to 1 year?
If I may interject.
Well, I think
I think we want to do both, but we have to balance the requirements. And if we come up with something that is not creating deployment issues, then of course I would prefer the best integration into the Yang universe that is possible. Yeah, we should devote an interim to this at some time in April, so we can spend more time discussing it.
Yeah, I think just declaring an existence of another Yang module, which is actually an extension. Extension is the right word. Having Yang extension for CBOR is something I think we can define it without others, because it's just our extension in the CBOR working group. And with that, we can say encoding this to CBOR can be done like this. The stand-ins can be defined inside the extension, and then everybody can use the extension. So we are reducing the time to market. And on the other hand, I think for now it's the best way how to integrate it with the Yang ecosystem anyway. I can't find anything better for now.
Thank you.
Jeff Haas again. So building on what Maria is saying, augmentation with an extension is the easiest path for exactly what's going on here. The challenge becomes it's very trivial to do these augmentations a node at a time to put in the bindings. That part is easy. We should pursue that one as a very short path to at least getting something done. The thing that is trickier for the language is the fundamental data types. So it's picking date and time and IP address as an example. Those are type defs inside of Yang. The language doesn't quite have the right plumbing to augment a type. That is unfortunately a fault of the language. There is room there to break the rules from CBOR land, in my opinion, if you want to go fast, because for the most part, things just make sense. You know, if this thing is an IP address, your schema actually can tell you that, because Yang schema will carry the fundamental base type through, but the actual type it is, this string is an IP address, does carry through the compilation tools, which means that if you externally influence it, it can do the right thing. I don't think they can do it in the language right now, but I think it's a rule that's easy to break.
Thank you. Yeah, I was hoping we could use an avenue that has a small footprint on Yang. So the worst case is that we have to touch every Yang module that wants to make use of this. And this should be a global thing. So you switch an entire server to stand-ins. Not you touch module by module and have to keep code for both around all the time. Maria's in the queue.
Yeah, myself once again, Maria from CZNIC. I'd like to I'd like to add +1 to Jeff. I think the right way to go is to rather break things slightly, and even push the NetMod working group to actually make the update of new Yang the right way, than to keep using the bad tools we currently have.
Okay, good. I was hoping we wouldn't have to push NetMod because it's really hard to push a cloud. But yeah. Good. I think we had a good discussion here. Oh, we actually do have a little bit of time left. So the last item on my list, and we will continue that afterwards, is the CBOR Pact document. Michael doesn't care about redundancy. That's the overriding concern, yes. So data items have a lot of redundancy, and we have been using compression mechanisms for a long time in the IETF to manage that redundancy. And the most obvious way to most people is to apply byte-wise data compression on an encoded representation. So people first generate JSON and then put it through deflate. Well, that does give you good compression in many cases, but it also means that the data item, the encoded data item you get from the network, is entirely useless before you have fully decompressed it. And therefore, what we are, I mean, this method 1 exists and is being used with CBOR, so we don't have to do anything to make that happen. It happens. But what CBOR Pact is about is applying compression at the data model level. And so this doesn't get confused. We call it packing and not compression. And the idea is that the consumer of a data item can work directly out of the stored packed representation. And this is not package representation, this is packed representation, but yeah, we all have to learn new words. And that is actually something that is much more accessible to a constrained implementation, because a constrained implementation is likely to use some form of API style access to things anyway. So this is something we want to have in our set of mechanisms. We have worked on a draft for this since the start of the pandemic. I've lost count. And we have a very stable part of that draft, which is the reference set. So the tags and simple values we assign to actually referencing something that is shared or compressed in some other way. So this is, again, a stand-in mechanism where we have a referencing tag or simple value stand in for the actual reference data. And that's how you actually use it when you access something and you find a stand and then just follow the pointer and use the shared or processed data. Okay, so that part is really stable. The reference semantics have grown a little bit over time. The reference to shared items is trivial, but we have several ways to reference something with arguments. And the most useful case is concatenation, but there are also other ideas. So we actually finally decided to put in an extension point. We already have tags in CBOR, so we can use function tags as an extension point, and we actually define a couple in the pack document because we are trying to ship this with batteries included. So the third thing that is probably least stable because we only want to ship a very basic battery here. So we never really focused on finishing it. It's probably easy to finish. Is the table building tags that build the tables, and we expect applications to come up with additional ways of doing this. And Christian will have one such way in a couple of minutes. So we have one open issue, number 20, which really is about how we represent the presence of errors in unpacking. One question, of course, would be, do we actually even have to represent errors, or do we just give up? So that's something we still have to discuss. And we have various proof of concept implementations. I don't think we have one that we would want to use in production yet, but we are playing around with this stuff and typically don't get lots of negative feedback. What's Priya? Go ahead.
Hello, I'd like to ask just a single question. I can do partially the same thing by designing the model itself
Sure.
in the right way. For example, sending a cache ahead and then having this packing inside the model itself. What's preferred?
Well,
Is it preferred to pack this way or by the model?
Having a common set of referencing tags has its advantages and its disadvantages. The advantage is that it's common, so it's already there, the numbers are already assigned. The disadvantage is, of course, that you have to coordinate its usage. So there may be cases where you just define your own tags, which will not be quite as efficient, but will probably still give you some gain. But for the most likely cases, it's probably good to have a common set of these tags so we can give them enough from the total code space we have to support this. And Brendan went away again. Okay. Yeah, so there are now 4 drafts in the Internet Drafts Directory that actually are relying on CBOR packed. And there is a 5th draft that is actually making an extension to it based on what are defined extension points for this. So they are not requiring a change in this draft. They are interacting with its extension points. So it's no longer something that we can just keep simmering, but we probably need to finish this stuff soon. So I think that's all I have. And maybe we can switch to Christian's item. Okay.
Seeing no questions pop up, yes, that's what I will do. So here we go. Yep, this is an individual draft that I've submitted for setting up tables, as Carsten has already outlined. So I can skip through the table setup, but there is an aspect of background that I'd like to focus on here. That is how this is used how this would be used in Coral. So Coral is sets up to be not only a replacement format for RFC 6690 link format documents, but more generally descriptions of resources on servers. And this can be part of discovery, this can be part of public subscribe topic discovery and topic setup, and has also been part of some group communication management documents. So there's a rather large variety of content that might be found in a Coral document. To express that variety, we'll sooner or later have to extend the vocabulary or the tables that come provisioned with a media type. So what I expect to be a common case is that we're using a media type, and that media type already, as described in PACT, has a set of table entries that can be used. So for example, here we're talking about, and completely disregard any syntax here, some sensor, and that we are saying that it has a title. For that we use a shared reference, 6-2 references somewhere inside the table, and then we say the value, and then the next line we have content type, which is the first simple 0 refers to the first table in the entry, and so on. So we are picking from that table, and for example, in this media type, that dictionary may contain something about 200 entry. If I'm saying dictionary on accident, sorry, that was an older term from CBOR. It's tables now. So that those tables might contain somewhat about 200 entries, maybe for the first iteration. Now, if that format gets extended, and all the caveats about negotiating versions and failing safe in case of an unknown item or negotiating presence do apply here, but those are well understood. If this can get extended already with what is in PACT, because the table entries beyond what is originally populated are originally undefined, so that those references would just trigger the mechanism that is the open issue in PACT that Carsten spoke about before. But if a consumer knows a new content of the table, for example, because an update defines how rel equals hardware description works, then that could be referenced, and there is a tag referencing into that previously undefined area of the tables. So that's well and good, and that works, but that works well for anything that is linear. So if we have a space and then the more uncommon items get added at the end, that works. And if there is one place where they can be added, that works well as well. But for a Coral application, there might be custom extensions that are not part of that central media type table setup. So how do we deal with them? We could, of course, prepend the tables with the one simple extension mechanism that is defined, but that means lugging around those tables and for every representation of a document. The mechanism introduced here, and sorry, the slides did not get updated. I've, in the meantime, updated the TBT 1142 mechanisms from the tutorial we've heard before. There could be a new mechanism to set up the table. So that is added here in the first line. That is setting up the table with 2 more entries. As with the simple setup, those 2 more entries are shifted in from the left to the table. So we're shifting in 2 items from somewhere that is described by that URI, and then we do all the references into that table as we have done before. And see, this is referencing to a URI. There is a dedicated document to whether or not you should use them or dereference them, and when you dereference them and what can go wrong. But also that is understood and described in the document, And if you prefer to use URNs or identify the tables, say by their by a hash of their content, that works just as well. So that's I'd say the obvious use of this document. There is one more efficient way of doing things, because both any hash or that name is rather long, but you could also use an identifier that is part of the dictionary. Now that brings you back a bit of the table. That brings you back a bit into the topic of centralization. So you would still depend on that central point that defines how the media types tables are set up. Again, but it only brings you back there for one entry. So in the concrete example of Coral, when PubSub is defined in terms of Coral, the one root media type for link relation style content could just add the one URI that describes PubSub extensions into its tables. And then a particular document could say that it imports 2 items from the location that we know by the shorthand stand in -90, which is yada yada example.com/calibration, or PubSub in that case. And then those 2 items are prepended, and the rest of the document can express everything it needs to express in a very concise way. And as with the preloading of the tables from the media type, that document can be extended later. And to allow it to be extended later, and also to allow the larger document to be understood, at least roughly, by processes that do not understand that precise reference, we always say how many items are prepended to the table. So when push comes to shove, a processor receives the document that does not know that reference -90, or does not know what example.com/calib precisely means. They can still process the document, and those 2 entries that have been pushed into the table will just resolve as undefined, and then it is up to the application or to the specification of the format to say whether encountering something that is undefined and cannot be uncompressed will be a hard error, in which case, there better be negotiation about supported extensions, or, as is the case in Coral and also in CRIs, whether that just means that this particular node in the larger data cannot be processed, but the rest of the document still can. State of the whole thing, I think it is largely feature complete. I'm working on an implementation. I'm working on incorporating it into Coral. And as for the future of the document, I'd like to ask whether this is something that this working group would like to take up. Thank you.
And I will just throw in a time check. We have 2 minutes left.
Oh, almost right on time. Carsten.
The question really is those application-oriented table setup thingies. Do they go into the application working group, or in this case, this would be core, or do they go here? And that of course depends on the level of application-orientedness that we sense for this.
I don't think that this is really application oriented. I think this is useful for not just for Coral, but just as useful for any application that prefers not to have tables in a media type, or that maybe is not even media type based and does not have any other bootstrapping mechanism for large tables that it shares across the application.
Okay, in that case, the answer is yes. I think we should do that here.
Thank you.
So I think at this point, we will get other opinions on this on the mailing list and decide what to do. All right, we are about out of time then. Are we done with the agenda, Christian?
Yes, I think so. Basically, that puts us in the. Oh no, there's one brief point to point out. Interims will continue. There are already proposed dates. This is keeping the cadence as always every other week in lockstep with core. And I think any other business?
Okay, we have hit the bottom of the hour. We thank you everybody for attending both remotely and in person. For those of you who are on site, this is the end of the IETF week, and there's the farewell reception starting upstairs in a few minutes. We will see you all online.
See you. Have a good trip home.